This is PTV World. I am SHABAHAT and you are watching Fault Lines. Nepal's government has approved a controversial bill, a bill that brings $500 million of US's aid and grant to Nepal. This bill has been passed by Nepal's government and its parliament with just sufficient numbers of the politicians supporting it. But there was a stiff opposition as well behind the bill. And most of the opposition came from the coalition partners of the government, which is led by SHABAHAT, the Prime Minister of Nepal at the moment. The opposition of this bill is primarily coming from the parties that are thought to be tilted more toward China, and they have a valid point. They believe that the sovereignty of Nepal can be compromised through the strings that are attached with the bill. It is also very pertinent to understand that Nepal sits at the juncture of two gigantic powers, that is India and China, and has to therefore maintain a delicate balance in its geostrategic posture. It reminds us that back in 2015 September, India had blocked the entire fuel chain supply of Nepal. That triggered tremendous amount of economic crisis in the country. Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my first guest to the program.
Nepal, the Himalayan nation, is caught in the middle of a geopolitical tug-of-war. Street protest and opposition from the communist parties rocked the nation as opponents of US infrastructure aid clashed in streets whereby police used tear gas and water cannons to disperse the crowd. On the 27th of February, after more than 5 years of deliberations, Nepal's House of Representatives of the Federal Parliament chose to ratify the Millennium Challenge Cooperation Compact. The vote came with an interpretive declaration stipulating that Nepal will not become part of any strategic, military or security alliance during the Indo-Pacific strategy of the US. According to Nepali media, US Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asian Affairs Don Lu recently held separate telephonic conversations with Nepali politicians, urging them to endorse the MCC Pact by February 28th, or Washington would review its ties with Nepal. In 2017, the year Nepal signed up to the BRI, the country's government also agreed to join the Millennium Challenge Corporation, a foreign assistance project of the US government. The MCC, created by the US Congress in 2004, offers large grants to support economic growth and reduce poverty, according to Washington. The US Embassy in Kathmandu, Nepal's capital city, has described the US grant as a gift from the American people, while Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying questioned as to why a grant came with an ultimatum. It's yet to be seen as to how Nepal will navigate geopolitical bickering between Beijing and Washington.
My first guest in today's program is from Nepal, Dr. Gandhi Pandit. He is a professor as well as a professor of law and a lawyer of the Supreme Court of Nepal, also a legal expert, and we will seek his expertise and his guidance on this matter. Dr. Gandhi, welcome to my program.
Thank you. Welcome.
Dr. Gandhi, we are discussing this bill of $500 million of American grant coming to Nepal. It is widely believed in this part of the world that there are some strings attached with this bill. Can you tell us more about this bill, sir?
Okay, Nepal is one of the poorest countries in the Asia, and our economy is heavily dependent on receiving grant and loan. For these purposes, we applied for compact grant in 2008, and we were chosen for this grant in 2012, and we signed an agreement for $500 million grant for economic development, and in which the grant money will be used for construction of transmission line and upgradation of road. So that's what a grant is, and we are getting benefit from this grant.
But Dr. Gandhi, I understand that this grant is primarily intended to be utilized for the infrastructure projects, as you pointed out. But what is coming from the opposition is the point that it is going to bring some compromises associated with the bill. There are some conditions that might not just be very good for Nepal. What are your comments on that, sir?
I think there was a humor about this agreement, and the opposite, even the some leader of the coalition government, especially leftist leader, were of the opinion that the money that we receive from India will help, will they will get Nepal into a, Indo-Pacific strategy, as well as the money will bring the U.S. military and your force within Nepal, creating some kind of very unfavorable situation. So they oppose that, saying that this is a military compact. But in fact, that was not the case. The loan was solely, the grant was solely for the economic and infrastructure development of Nepal. Even the agreement that we have signed in 2017 between US and Nepal, Article 2.7 has clearly stipulated that the money will be only used for infrastructure development, not for the military activities. It is a totally prohibited. So there was confusion there, but lately, everybody, there was a in favor and opposition of this grant. I spoke in various forums saying that, as per the law, as a lawyer of the student of the law, what I said was that the this is one of the best grant we are receiving with less, more favorable condition than with compared to the other agreement or other grant we are receiving from World Bank and ADB. So that's why, but lately we have obtained that the Parliament has approved this agreement.
Dr. Gandhi, the point is well taken, but many that are primarily inclined toward China believe that the role of Chinese influence can be compromised, or the way China takes interest in Nepal. The parties that are aligned with China are standing against it. Washington, D.C. is even labeling allegations that China is behind the smear campaign. Do you agree with these allegations, sir?
No, I think there are some reasons that we have to look into, or some issues. What happened that when we are taking after we signed that this compact agreement 2017, then 2019 we have also signed implementation agreement. But after that, when we were in the process of implementing the agreement, there is huge cry and opposition from the political party has come, especially leftist party and leader. They're saying that this is anti-nationalist. This is against the sovereignty, against the interest of Nepal. So we should refuse this grant. We shouldn't take it. And they were saying that if we take this grant, our relation with the India, China will be deteriorated. So we should not be taking. There is a and other party, no, no, it will not deteriorate any relation. It's, in fact, it is the benefit of the country. Then political gluing between two parties has brought, and we were not in a position to even endorse this agreement. Then America, US has called the Nepalese government saying that the deadline is February 28. If you want to take it. If you don't want to take, then we have to review our bilateral relationship. And we thought that if you are taking this money, we believe that you are tilted towards China. When China, America has said that things, then China is also saying that that's they came into picture. Otherwise, China had no direct opposition of this grant coming to Nepal because it is for development. As long as this grant is used for the development issue, and it is not contradicting the security interest of India or maybe China, they are not opposing this loan. That's
Thank
the
you
reason
very
that.
much. Thank you very much, Dr. Gandhi Pandit, for being guest in my program. Ladies and gentlemen, this was Dr. Gandhi Pandit, who is of the view that there is enough propaganda around the subject. Primarily, the opposition is coming out of the polity of Nepal, where people have a split of opinion, certainly. And some believe this might just begin a problem or maybe a compromise on Nepal's national interest. But he himself is of the view that given the economic situation of the country, this bill is greatly required and will help Nepal, which he believes to be is the poorest country in the region. I have another guest from Nepal to join me in this program, and he's Samantha Dahal. Samantha Dahal is not only an advocate, not only a lawyer, but he also advises the government of Nepal on various issues with regards to infrastructures. Welcome to my program, Samantha Dahal.
Thank you, Sabahat, for having me.
And we are discussing this bill that is being debated around the world. Many believe that there are strings attached to this bill which just might not be serving Nepal's immediate interest. What are your thoughts about this bill that is debated in the country at the moment?
Right, Sapat. I think let's first of all clarify that this is not a bill that's being debated. It is actually an agreement, a treaty that was entered into between the Nepal and the United States. On behalf of Nepal, the Ministry of Finance signed this agreement, and on behalf of United States, the Middle and Challenge Corporation signed this agreement. So it's actually a treaty, that is being was considered by the Parliament for ratification. And when it was presented to the Parliament, the House of Representatives of Nepal, for ratification, then soon after that, the debate, on both sides, whether this agreement is in favor of Nepal, whether the agreement would help enable, expand Nepal's transmission line system, and and on the negative side, whether the agreement has strings attached, which could compromise Nepal's sovereignty, was debated, very vehemently. But finally, after due consideration, the Parliament approved to ratify this bill. I'm so sorry, the agreement, the treaty on February 27th, along with the interpretative declaration, which is allotted to the House of Parliament.
But Mr. Dahal, a famous politician from your country, Bhim Rawal, has a different view of that. And he believes that this is going to bring Nepal under the umbrella of US security. Do you agree with this statement by Bhim Rawal?
Right, sir, Sabat. I think let me just elaborate with a brief profile and background of Dr. Bhim Rawal. Mr. Bhim Rawal is a doctorate in philosophy, and he's a senior politician of Nepal Communist Party, United Marxist and Leninist. He's currently a member of parliament. He's a former deputy prime minister and a defense minister of the nation. However, because the statements he made in parliament is fully devoid of legal and factual efficacy, I can only politely request him to examine the aid assistance from the right perspective, and carefully read the MCC compact. MCC's aid assistance program is an economic development package. It does not have any nexus to any security or military alliance. Neither the MCC compact, what I mean the compact, the agreement entered into between Nepal and the United States, includes any matter related to security strategy, or purpose to include any matter related to security strategy. Nor, I would again emphasize that, nor any reports produced by the U.S. government, says that the MCC compact is part of broader security strategy of the United States, including the Indo-Pacific strategy. Bear in mind
Samantha,
that in fact, the MCC agreement that Nepal government has signed is a proper provision, a very explicit provision, which says that the aid assistance that the Nepal is receiving, the 500 million grant, should not be used for any military, security, police or militia. So I think it's very clear that this aid assistance program is not meant for a military or a security strategy.
thank you very much, Samantha, for making it so clear. But once again, there is something that we would like to understand, taking advantage of your expertise. We all understand that the relationship between Nepal and India has remained slightly strained in the past. Please tell us how this relationship is at the moment, because there was a recent standoff, I mean, just last year between between China and India, and Nepal sits on the border of the two countries. So how is the diplomatic relationship between these two countries at the moment?
Important question. I think although I am not a practitioner of diplomacy or international relation, I think I can slightly elaborate on this point and provide my point of view. I think as neighbors, India and Nepal, we share frontiers which is open for free movement. Nepal and India have unique relation that goes, back to history, culture, and also to some extent religious and social ties that we have between the countries. Nepal's legal assertion of territorial rights over certain territories lying on the the right bank of the Mahakali River on the western front has bothered India. And although Nepal has a legal claim to that, has bothered India. But despite that, I think I should emphasize that despite that, the cooperation between Nepal and India has been evolving continuously and on different multidimensional fronts. I think I should actually focus on one front here, that is the power sector cooperation, because this this power MCC agreement that the Nepal government has signed with MCC compact the Nepal government has signed with the United States has a component on transmission line system, which goes and gets connected with the Indian transmission line system. So it's going to be interconnection that will be connecting two cities of Nepal and India, the Gorakhpur in the Uttar Pradesh state of India and Butwal in the Gandaki province of Nepal. So the main and in that agreement, and also in the Nepal India cooperation, there is now an agreement, some consensus that this line has to be built, this interconnection has to be built between Nepal and India. And the reason this line is being considered to be built is that this will enable more trade of power between the two countries. As you
Thank you
know,
very
that
much.
Nepal is recognized.
Thank you very much, Samantha Dahal, for being guest in my program. I'm now joined by Pushpa Raj Acharya, a famous Nepali journalist and former president of Society of Economic Journalists of Nepal. Let's add some strategic and economic angle to this conversation. Pushpa Raj, I welcome you to my program.
Thank you for having me in your program.
And we are discussing now the relationship between Nepal and its neighboring countries, just because we want to understand the challenges that the country has at the moment due to its geo-economic or geostrategic posture that it has at the moment. Tell us, how's the relationship between India and Nepal from 2015 onwards?
As you have said that Nepal-India relation from 2015 and onwards, in 2015, September 2015, India has imposed economic blockade to Nepal after promulgation of constitution. And if you see that in Nepal-India relations, there are some sort of fluctuation as we say open border, and we have multidimensional relationship between two nations. And the major thing that what we say is India has some sort of big brother mentality in South Asia, and sometimes they try to micromanage many things, or internal affairs of Nepal as well. And in reaction, sometimes the relation, sometimes there are some hiccups in relation that we have witnessed in Nepal-India relations. So basically, from Nepal side, I must say that Nepal is always committed to maintain amicable relation with India, because I have highlighted that we geopolitical location-wise, we share open border with India, 1,700 kilometer long open border with India, and historically we have been said that Nepal is jammed between two giant rocks. So Nepal is always
Pushpa Raj. It is an important point. I understand that the relationship is quite delicate because Nepal is quite a small state and India is quite a big power of this region. But the recent standoff, I mean, when I say recent, this is last year, the military standoff between China and India must have been a testing time for Nepal. Do you agree with me on that, sir?
Yeah, I do agree that when there is tensions on the border of India and Bhutan at that time, Nepal is a delicate. You have said that the delicate relation between India and Nepal. I must say that we should agree that our geopolitical situation is fragile. So I do agree on your point that when there is tension in the region, that is spread all over the region.
And Pushpa Raj, how do you see the economic challenges of the government of Nepal? Because the guest I had before you in this program was of the view that in the given economic situation, there are little options but to go for international aid and grant for government of Nepal. Do you agree with him on that, sir?
Yeah, basically, Nepal, Nepal, Nepal is dependent on foreign aid for financing the development projects. Uh, I think two-thirds of the capital expenditure, what we say, the infrastructure budget, comes from the development aid. And being a aid-dependent country, so we should have to maintain amicable relation with all the power nation and those providing aid to Nepal, and also with the neighboring giants, India and China. What Nepal has demonstrated uh, the relationship on its through its foreign policy uh, since the beginning.
Thank you very much, Pushpa Raj Acharya, for being a guest in my program. Ladies and gentlemen, this was Pushpa Raj Acharya from Nepal, a famous journalist. 2 points that he made were extremely important. The first one is that two-thirds of the economy is dependent on the foreign aids, and that actually makes Nepal's economic situation quite difficult. The other thing that he pointed out is that Nepal has to maintain a delicate balance in its policy with both the strong and powerful neighbors, and this will continue to be the same. We'll take a break and join you back after a while. Stay with us. Welcome back. As the escalation between Russia and neighboring Ukraine is going on, there is an important thing that has been done by the West, led by United States, but certainly the entire West has unilaterally gone forward in this direction, and that is to take Russia's 70% banks of the SWIFT system. Now, what is SWIFT? It is Society of Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, a system that actually makes the international trade practically possible. There are 11,000 member banks across 200 countries connected to the SWIFT system. And literally all the international trading is actually taking place through the SWIFT system. Taking Russia or any country for that matter off the SWIFT system actually is one of the largest economic punishments can possibly be given to damage a country's trade. According to French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire, he said it is like using a financial nuclear bomb against a country. Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my guest to this part of my program.
SWIFT, which stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, is an independent enterprise based in Belgium that provides a messaging system linking more than 11,000 banks and financial institutions in over 200 countries and territories. This global messaging system relays instructions from one bank to another, and it has capabilities beyond financial messaging as it provides a platform for comprehensive transaction management services. Founded in 1973, SWIFT allows banks to send money to each other. It uses standardized secure codes that allow institutions to send and receive information such as instruction for transferring money across borders, handling 42 million remittances per day. SWIFT is a communication mechanism rather than a tool for transferring actual funds, and it is fundamentally transforming payments and securities processing to help its customers navigate the complex financial challenges. A cutoff from SWIFT not only terminates all international transactions, but it also triggers currency volatility and causes massive capital outflows. Banks cut off from SWIFT could use other systems like System for Transfer of Financial Messages (SPFS) system established by Russian Central Bank after 2014 invasion of Crimea, or the CIPS network, which stands for Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, created by People's Bank of China.
As today's topic sits at the juncture of international politics and economics, I had to invite a guest who is an expert of political economy, and he has been in our few programs before as well. I'm glad to be joined by Mr. Sultan Ali Haider.
Well, thank you, Shabahad.
Sultan, welcome to the program. And help us to understand this SWIFT system. How does it help to make the international trade possible?
Okay, first of all, SWIFT is essentially purely a messaging mechanism. So money is not getting transferred through SWIFT. So one of the misconceptions that has gotten created is that people think that, okay, with cutoff of SWIFT, money transfer is going to stop. Essentially, SWIFT is a secure platform, just like we have WhatsApp these days. So WhatsApp is a secure messaging system, and it cannot be usually hacked. So when they cut off from SWIFT, it is a huge thing. Its implications have been tested only in case of two countries, that is Iran and North Korea. But again, this was a step that the US and Europe were taking a bit reluctantly. I believe in terms of politics, lot of pressure came, public pressure came onto them, especially after the Ukrainian president's appeal that West is not doing enough and is not making enough pressure on Russia. So I personally feel that they were not themselves prepared initially, because if you see, it was not part of the initial sanctions list. The issue is that the full implications of a large economy like Russia that is integrated with so many of the countries, especially the Western world, it was unknown. For example, had it been an African or South American economy that was purely linked to local neighboring countries, it would have been much easier because it would not have impacted the West itself.
And are there any parallels available for the system? Because what I essentially understand from your conversation is that if the messages are not going in and out, this means you're off the grid for the moment.
Yeah, you're off the grid, but then again, you do have the ability to communicate through emails, faxes. Again, there's this chance of how secure the message is. Essentially, it's the authentication of the message. So if between two banks, if the documents have been received, is a payment to be made, things like that. So that needs to be authenticated. So that makes the whole process more cumbersome, but it does not mean that the money flow cannot happen. The money flow cannot happen if, for example, as part of sanctions, if an individual or an entity or a Russian company, it is sanctioned, its accounts are frozen in a particular bank in the United States or Western Europe. So that is when money cannot flow from that account. Or
so the money can still float, international trade can still operate, but the messaging platform has been blocked.
Yeah, it's okay. Now, thing is that you need a very determined person to make that trade possible, because it's just like telling somebody you have to go from here to London, but you cannot use an aeroplane. So now usually people are used to that, so they have to figure out, okay, do I take a car or do I take a ship in between? How do I do that?
Sultan, doesn't it remind all the countries that are in a tough posture or in a difficult posture against United States that US's soft power, particularly in the field of economics and international banking and financial management, is now far more deadlier than any other weapon that United States is likely going to use against rivals? And I would particularly say this because there is a trade war between United States and China going on as well.
So this makes things very interesting because it's more a matter of, it's an extremely powerful tool and weapon. And I heard some commentators say it's a modern day siege, and yes, it's a very effective siege. But if you use something too much, then it can backfire, because other such people, just as you were saying, their planners would be thinking, how do we crack it and how do we get off this dependence? So it's good to use your power to some extent, but beyond a point, if you start using it, then people will start looking for alternatives. Once they create that, then this power itself will start to diminish. For example, I think your package also mentioned about after the 2014 Crimea sanctions, regarding the threat of sanctions on SWIFT. Interestingly, about when they were about to happen, Russia said that it will be taken as an act of war, right? So now there is war and sanctions have been imposed. So it's very interesting how that will play out. But due to that threat, what Russia tried to do, it's tried to establish its own parallel to SWIFT, and yes, SPFS. So they started doing that.
SPFS?
SPFS.
And what is that?
So that is their alternative to SWIFT. Again, a secured, you see, it's just like you have Telegram, you have WhatsApp, you have so many other.
But Sultan, the other side, if I'm not using WhatsApp or if I'm not using Telegram and your WhatsApp is blocked, you're trying to reach me out with Telegram.
No, excellent.
Since I do not have it, how would I
excellent.
receive it?
Excellent point. So you see, so this is a very rapidly changing world, right? So in this world, modern age, compared to even 15, 20 years ago, people can adjust very quickly. Just like in Arab Spring, people was changing different platforms to gather around, right? So if WhatsApp is blocked and I have Telegram, maybe I can pass a message to you. Why don't you download Telegram? And we can. So now there are 400 plus institutions, mostly Russian, that are using this Russian platform of SPFS. So it's a matter of then people maybe switching to that. You see, this act has been taken. One interesting thing is that the European Central Bank, ECB, it asked its institutions 1 month ago to start preparing and simulating what will be the fallout, what are the assets of the Russians or Russian companies, how the trade is happening, if we use sanctions, if we block SWIFT, what will be the implications. Why is that happening? Because full implications are not fully understood. So yes, this act has been taken in haste. You see, once, as I say, once war breaks out, all plans fail, right?
Don't you think it is because of the enough pressure that NATO has on it? Because even the Ukrainian president is now pointing out fingers at NATO and saying, you haven't done enough for us, you are trying to help us from home, and this is not what was promised to us. So don't you think it has been done with less calculation and more out of the frustration that have created for NATO, including United States?
I think very true. One of the American analysts who has been part of the Treasury sanctions regime in the US in around 2014 era. So she was invited to speak about this, how do sanctions work, and she was trying to explain the misunderstandings or misconceptions around it. And one thing was clear, which she was saying, that this is not a silver bullet. This is not going to solve the problem entirely. So it is always in conjunction with other maybe military hardware going in, boots on the ground. So this usually puts additional pressure, but this cannot be the only tool that impacts. Now, where the issue is, the very interesting thing is, in terms of economy, they have taken this step under a lot of pressure because they were not doing any of the other stuff. Once they put in some sanction, but they said, yes, we'll still continue to trade in oil and gas with Russia. There was a lot of hue and cry, and there was a lot of talk about hypocrisy. And it was a lot of do more pressure by the intelligentsia on the Western governments. As a reaction, they did that. Now, what I would say is their hand was forced in doing this. Now, the implication is that there are a lot of American or Western banks and entities who have extended loans to Russia in hundreds of billions of dollars, right? Maybe around $230 billion. So now that amount of money, how do they get their money back, right? While they're talking about cutting off Russia from the international debt market so that Russia is not able to raise any debt or capital.
And one more important angle that I want you to touch upon before we close this segment of the program is that Russia is exporting its gas that is serving as a primary fuel. In Europe, for more than 70% of the market share lies with the Russian gas. So is this not going to hit back Europe even harder?
it's going to hit back Europe even harder. And you see how this plays out again as in any war, right? This is an economic war, but as in any war, you can start it, but you don't know how it will end. Our Prime Minister says that often, right? So the commodity prices are going to go up. The further they go up, it's going to benefit Russia. So it's very interesting, right? The prices crashed, they stand to lose. If there's absolute peace and dollar per barrel comes down to 25, 30, Russia stands to lose. You see, there was a lot of analysis recently about even the Gulf countries not being able to balance their budgets if the price falls below 80 or $60 per barrel, right? So for Russia, it's very interesting. While selling oil would be difficult, because you see, again, test case, we have two test cases. One is North Korea, the other is Iran. North Korea is not very well documented because it's very isolated. It doesn't trade a lot with other countries. Iran is a different thing. As much as there have been sanctions and it has been cut off, it has been celebrated, it has impacted Iran, no doubt. But Iran's exports of petroleum have not been killed, right? They are still
killed entirely.
Yeah, no,
yet,
not
yet damaged a lot, but not killed entirely.
Not killed. And damaged a lot, but not to that extent. I would still say Iran pretty much is still, you see, running the show. The other countries are buying it. Now, that is where, for Russia, again, it is such a huge country. From Western Europe to, it borders on the Pacific, right? And then it borders China, one of the largest markets, its largest trading partner. So it will be very interesting for how it plays out. Only time will tell.
Thank you very much, Sultan Ali Haider, for your comments. And ladies and gentlemen, Sultan Ali Haider explained a quite unique dimension of this overall problem of SWIFT, that the more chaos that is created by such unthought actions within the fuel markets, commodity market of Europe and the United States, the better financial position of Russia gets, that is going to play a very important role in supplying fuel to Europe for maybe 60 more years to come. And that is one very important aspect of this escalation, that economically the escalations are favoring Russia more than they are favoring anyone else. We'll join you next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.